Hello and welcome to the Career Success Podcast. I'm Jason Connolly. If you're a regular listener, it's great to have you back. But if you're new, welcome to the show. In this series every week, we speak to the biggest names in business all across the globe. We talk about their career stories, the lessons learned, how they overcome challenges, and what success habits they practice. Practical advice to help you in your career. If you have a passion for business, then this is the podcast for you. In this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Betsy Kauffman from North Carolina in the US. Betsy is a globally recognized leadership and organizational agility coach with more than 20 years' experience working in Fortune 500 companies. Betsy's company, Cross Impact Coaching, helps leaders create innovative, aligned, disruptive, and agile organizations. Her mission is to create workplaces where people wake up each morning feeling motivated and inspired by their work, so they end their days feeling fulfilled and valued. She's a published author providing thought leadership to both the Agile and project management communities and speaks internationally on leadership, corporate culture, and organizational agility. Betsy just completed her first TED Talk, 4 tips to kickstart honest conversations at work. In September 2020, she did this in conjunction with TED PMI partnership. Betsy, thanks for joining me on this episode.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jason. I'm kind of tired after you reading that. Long
It's a beautiful, absolutely beautiful introduction. And there's so much I want to unpack with you. 20 years experience working in Fortune 500 companies. But tell us about you, Betsy. How did you kind of get to where you are? And let's go on a whistle stop tour through your career.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely. So it's funny. A lot of it, I would say, is somewhat intentional and somewhat divine intervention. I basically started as a project manager about 20 or so years ago. I'm going to age myself here, maybe a little bit longer than that. And I really loved doing that work. And I loved watching projects come to fruition. As I got more and more experience, I found that I was working with quite a few senior leaders and C-levels. And the whole dynamic of working in that leadership space is really intriguing to me. And then I started moving my way into the agile world. And I'm sure hopefully your listeners have heard about it. It's a big buzzword, and everybody's trying to achieve agility and go into this agile
Mm.
space. And so I did quite a few years in that space. And again, as I was working in organizations and helping them to achieve agility, I'd have these leaders come tap me on the shoulders and say, "Hey, can you help me here? Because we're struggling." And so I just found myself really trying to work with leaders and help them to figure out how do they create these innovative, disruptive, agile organizations. And it's not just about software, it's about actually achieving agility. And that's where I am today. I do lots of great work with many companies throughout the US and they're globally as well. And it's fun and it's challenging and it definitely keeps me on my toes for sure.
And I can imagine it does. What is a disruptive agile organization? How would you kind of define that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, really, it's one. So, if you think about where we are in the state, I mean, things are rapidly happening within the universe, right? I mean, we've just got all kinds of disruptors coming. If you think about it, used to take us potentially 5 years or 10 years to see changes and trends emerge. And now we've got kids that are sitting in their basements trying to figure out how to disrupt these large organizations, right? And so, you start thinking about the Amazons and the Ubers and the Google.
Mm.
There's always something that's sitting there and trying to figure out how to solve for these big mammoth problems. We've got people that are really smart and we're able to do them at lightning speed now. So we need as organizations to figure out how to continue to stay disruptive and how to meet our customer needs. And to do that, you've got to be agile. You need to bring agility. You need to be quick. You need to be customer focused. You need to be able to pivot rapidly and not allow the minutia of an organization to slow you down. And so that is my goal, is to really work with these leadership teams and the teams to figure out how do we start to figure out what is going to disrupt our industry and apply those principles from agility to help us.
Are you kind of brought in when there's a problem, or are you kind of brought into, with to maybe drive growth, or is there kind of a set situation when someone says, right, we need to call in Betsy?
Yeah. So I'm brought in on a couple different things. One is, hey, we're going through a transformation. Either it's an agile transformation or we're trying to change the way that we work together and it's just not working. We need some help.
Mm.
The other thing is we've been trying to get a product out the door and our teams aren't working well. Our organization is not poised right to do this. Can you come in and help us? And so it's really like hey, we're just struggling and we want to, we've tried it once and we want some more help. And so I come in from that perspective. And it's fun and it's engaging and it's complex because, a lot of times when I get brought in, they've actually been at it for about a year to 2 years and they're not seeing the results that they want. And so I come in, assess, we have very honest conversations, which kind of led to my TED talk about
Yeah.
what's happening, why are we don't have the structures in place, or we maybe don't have the right people working together, or potentially we don't even have the right talent needed to get this work done. And so we talk about
Mm.
those different levers that happen, and then we start to figure out how to solve for them.
And it's really interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of people out there, Betsy, who proclaim to be business coaches
Yeah.
or people who can help businesses. But I think one thing that I really picked up from you reading into you was, I'm guessing you've kind of been there, done that, worn the t-shirt for many a decade, and it's kind of I'm guessing you must have been through a hell of a lot of challenges to be able to be parachuted into these environments, in
Yes.
the first place,
Yes.
to help. And I'm guessing you've been through a hell of a lot of tough times yourself to be able to come in as a very kind of
Right.
calming influence, bring kind of calm to maybe what might be a chaotic situation.
Yeah, I have. I mean, I've been fortunate that I've actually worked in so many different sectors: retail, financial, energy, insurance. I'm spending a lot of time in the insurance space right now. And so healthcare.
Was that intentional, that kind of variety, or was that just kind of you following opportunity and it being quite fluid and natural, or was that kind of deliberate in the way that happened, or
Yeah, good question.
tell us a bit
It's
about
been
that.
really fluid. So as the work presents
Mm,
itself, I don't really peg myself to say, well, I only do insurance or I only do energy or I only do financial. I'm fortunate enough where I live in the Southeast US, there's a lot of different sectors here and they're all solving for some really big problems. And so I've
mm.
been, fortunate enough to be able to be brought in to say, okay, hey, you solved for this. Can you come in and solve for that? And what's interesting is it actually starts out typically in the technology space. So I guess maybe that's the common thread is that I'm brought in
Mm,
by technology executives, but then I end up spending more time with, the business partners to say, okay, how do we work better together between business and technology? So I think from a sector perspective, it can be varied. The theme is that technology thread. And when you think about agile, that's really the whole like agile movement, and there's this big massive movement out there. It came formalized from the software development world, but it's leaking into all over different companies and organizations: HR, marketing, legal, finance. So we're seeing how can we bring agility to our organization as opposed to just applying agile practices to our technology delivery.
and I guess you're bought in for technology, and I don't work in the technology sector as such, but behind everything technical is people.
Yes.
So it all goes back. Tell me if I'm wrong here, but I'm guessing even when you're brought in for a technical thing, really, it's the people behind the technology, but ultimately you're being brought in to sort
Absolutely.
out.
Yeah. So I'm not technical by nature. I think I know enough to be dangerous and I know like, this doesn't seem right. But I truly am, it's
Right.
about the people. It's about the culture and the organization and the structure and what have we set up in place that's impeding us from achieving our goals. So it's kind of funny because they bring in these, non-tech type folks that come into coach, but they really are looking for pragmatic folks that can actually say, okay, how do we organize our people to work better together? How do we get business and technology to partner together? So these are like just common human centric topics as opposed to really technical, because there's a lot of smart people in every organization I go into and I let them solve the technology problems or I'll bring in a
Yeah.
coach, like, oh, let me bring in a technical coach that can help you with this from a, let's look at all the different pieces. But from the human side of it and the organizational structure side of it, let's focus on that, because that's really majority of the time what is the underlying causes of why we're not achieving our goals or why we're not rapidly moving or delivering product or whatever the need is that we're trying to tackle.
Is there common things that you tend to find when you go into a company where you think, "Oh, it's this one again. It's this potential problem." Is there kind of common themes that you find when you go into these different companies, even if there is varying, variety to the sectors in which you work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of it comes down to communication or a lack thereof, right? So it's that
Mm,
common communication. It's having the space to collaborate and just and being able to talk openly about what's going on. Structure and organizational hierarchy has a lot to do with it as well. What type of culture are you created? Do we have a lot of layers that are having to make decision rights and not allowing the different folks to talk and have the communication? So, I mean, those are definitely the common themes that I see over and over and over again. And so it's starting to bring the people together and having those conversations.
Right, and one of your missions, as I said in the intro, is to create workplaces where people wake up each morning feeling motivated
Yes.
and inspired by their work, and also to end their days feeling fulfilled and valued. Now, that all sounds absolutely fabulous.
Doesn't
What
it
a lovely mission to have.
though?
It does, but how do you, there's many kind of dimensions there to that one sentence in itself. How do you help organizations create that? Because, I guess one thing I've talked about on this show before is a culture is a very hard thing to change as well. If you're going into a culture, how, do you create that, the environment that allows people to kind of, be the best version of themselves?
I think it's well, one is, do people understand what they're actually working on? Or are they just coming into work and doing their job and kind of feeling like a
Mm,
cog in a wheel, right? So it's making sure that folks understand the purpose of why they're here and what the organization is trying to achieve. So that's the big part. When I wake up every morning, I want to be motivated. I want to come in, I want to
mm,
log into my computer. I want to get on these calls. And a lot of times I find that if they don't understand how their piece of their work applies to the bigger picture or to the whole of it, they're not motivated. They don't understand it. The other piece is autonomy. I think, as individuals, we want to be able to self direct and to lead our own work. And when we've got somebody
mm.
telling us exactly what to do and how to do it, check your brain at the door, there's very little motivation there. So it's how do we set up one, the communication structure, the vision? Do people understand what they are being tasked to do? Also, do they, are they able to self direct? Are they able to make decisions on their own on behalf of their work, the product, the customer, wherever they are, right? And so, if we can't create those types of corporate structures, then you're not going to have that motivation. And then, when we get to the fulfillment and value, do you love what you do? Are you in a good spot? Are you learning and are you growing? Are you working with people who value the skills that you bring to the table? And I think it's really up to leaders to help to make sure we're creating that type of environment where folks do feel that way. Because if we don't, then you're going to lose potentially some really great individuals because they don't feel like they're being heard or their work doesn't matter. And I've seen it happen
Do you,
time and time again.
and that's really interesting. But I'm a big believer that everything kind of comes to the, from the top in an organization. But I'm guessing there must have been times where you've gone into companies where you've had to have somewhat of a management clear out, because if you've not got the managers or the leaders in the business all singing from the same hymn sheet, then how are you going to fulfill those objectives that you
Right.
have to create this beautiful working environment?
Yeah, I mean, it's bringing these problems to the forefront, right? So it's saying, if you guys want motivated individuals, you've got to communicate your vision. What are we doing
Mm,
here? And if we don't want to communicate that, and if we want to keep very secret, then there's going to be problems, right? Don't expect your folks to actually do the work the way you want them to. And we're going to continue to create this environment. So it is again being very blunt and honest with leaders. Some leaders make it, some leaders don't. And I think that those become the tough decisions that folks have to make to say, all right, what do we want? Do we actually want to commit to changing how we work together and how
mm.
we communicate with our team members? And if they don't, they're going to see the negative results that they've seen time and time again. Right. And so that's where it becomes really critical that they say, okay, we acknowledge that we need to work on A, B, and C. However, we may or may not want to do that now. And that's okay too, but just realize what the results will be. So I think that becomes a decision making piece of it from a leadership standpoint. And that's why it's tough to be a leader. Sorry, I know you're trying to.
It's no, no, no. Betsy, you're making a lot of very good points. I feel like I'm doing that thing where I'm queuing. I want to ask. I want to ask more questions. You kind of mentioned about leaders and people having the right skills to do that. What do you think necessarily separates a good leader from a bad leader? Is there kind of a set of personality traits? And I'm guessing that you must be pretty good at reading people.
Yeah.
To be you when you're going into this environment, you're trying to navigate all these different people, personality types, and So I'm guessing you must have kind of a set vision of, what you maybe define as someone who's a good leader, or again, is that subjective? Is that dependent on the environment, the company, or something like that?
Yeah, I think there's probably a set of core behaviors that you see in any good leader, regardless of the sector. But
Mm,
I'm probably gonna miss them. So I hope your listeners don't say she forgot this one. But I think one of them is being able to listen, right? So a leader that can actually listen to their people and listen to their peers
mm.
and not always talking over them. One that can be humble, one that can acknowledge, okay, I've got to help navigate this large impediment and is willing to go to battle for their team. A decision maker as well. A lot of times, teams and individuals are looking for a decision and for direction, and they're not getting it. And so it's being able to balance that. How often do I actually give a decision, or do I sit back and allow my team to make those decisions? And it's for me, it's this art and a science, right? And we're constantly going between this dance of leadership and trying to figure out it's almost a practice, like we're practicing leadership, because some days we're going to get it right and other days we're not going to get it right, and being able to retrospect and learn that is, I think, really critical. And I think, going back to your question, I mean, I would say one of my superpowers is having that self-awareness and intuition when I do meet with leaders, because once I get the opportunity to talk to them and kind of get to know them, I'm able to pretty quickly figure out, okay, how does this leader operate, how they operate with their teams, what's important to them, their style, their communication, where do we maybe have some blind spots that we need to work on, and where do they have strengths that we really need to leverage, based on their peers and where they're interacting.
And I'm guessing you being brought into a company, I can imagine some people roll out the red carpet, but I can imagine other people, you maybe not met with the warmest of receptions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm kind of in a situation like that right now. I was brought in to just kind of get a
Mm,
little bit into the organization, and they're going through a large transformation. And one of the C levels brought me in just to be some eyes and ears on the ground and talk to people about what's actually going on. And so I did that, and I reported back and had some, pretty strong recommendations. And it's tough, but I think, in this role, you also have to have empathy, and you also need to
mm,
be able to talk to people and understand their situation and what they're going through, not only just professionally, but and if they're willing to open up personally, because every person has a story, of how they
mm.
got to where they are, what's going on in their personal life, where are they now, and most times they also have a recommendation, like, okay, we know this isn't going really well, what do you recommend? And just being able to listen and empathize and relate, I think, is a huge skill that I try to bring as well when I work with different individuals and organizations.
And when I was kind of looking at some of the challenges that you've had in your own career, you kind of, I think you made a big mistake about culture when you were going through that journey yourself, which I'm guessing obviously has massively taught you a lot of lessons.
Yeah.
And in the show notes when I was reading before, you put that it really comes down to trusting your gut, because I know there's so many people out there, they make the bad decision when it comes to necessarily picking the right role, but you think it's down to really trusting your gut on what you're seeing and hearing, and the kind of well, put it bluntly, the gut feeling that you're getting.
Yeah, I do. I really do. It's funny. I've had this conversation a lot recently. And a few years ago, I went to go join a consulting firm, and my gut had told me, yeah, I don't know if it's the right fit. I don't know if you should go do this. I was going to maybe put my company on hold for a little bit and go work for this firm. And my head kept saying, no, go do it. Now, my head was reasoning with myself, which most of the time that's what happens, right? As humans.
Yeah.
But my gut, if I really went down to the core of it, was like, there was definitely some warning signs going there. And I got into the company, and day one, I sat down
Mm.
and no one talked to me. No, what there was not a warm welcome. There was not, we're glad to have you here. I even had a few folks that were like, not everybody on the leadership team agreed to bring you in. Like, they told me that day one, right? So
Oh, that's not really making you feel
that's not
particularly.
making you feel
Yeah,
very
you're
good.
not. That's not motivating you on the
Right,
first day, is it?
right. And as you kind of got in, as I got into
Who
it,
are these
I
people? Who are
know,
these
I
people
know
that
it's
don't want me here? I
crazy.
demand to know.
But it happens. I mean, this happens very frequently. And it
Mm,
comes down to safety and psychological safety. And as I got more and more into the role, it just wasn't a good fit for me. Culturally, I just
Mm.
did not like where they were motivated and where they were going. It was a very, everybody was kind of rewarded and compensated based on their individual efforts as opposed to the group and team collective efforts. And I know for me, that is not an
Mm.
environment that I do well in. So, and if I had just trusted my gut, I would have saved myself several months of like hand wringing and what do I do and like stress and all the things that, potentially some of your listeners are going through right now. Is trust your gut and go with exactly what it's telling you, because that's usually 99.9% the right decision.
And I do 100% agree with you. I went against my gut feeling, not just once, but twice in my career when it came to picking a role, and both times it was a complete disaster. One thing I want to talk to you about as well. You do courage and confidence workshops to help individuals and teams to show up more confidently at work, but not just in work, in life in general.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really beautiful thing. I think a lot of people, especially young people, as well, maybe not just young people, people from all different backgrounds, want to build up their confidence,
Hmm.
especially to go up the career ladder. And I was only reading an article as recently as today that said about, to sort of move forward with your career, you've got to kind of have that internal PR. There is a bit of a game to be played when it comes to rising up the ranks in kind of career.
Hmm.
But how is it that we're never going to unpack what you do in one of your workshops in the time that we have? But I'm sure there's people listening to this show right now that thinks, I want to be more confident. I want to, really kind of be more true to myself and stuff. What kind of advice would you give to people who want, an injection of confidence?
Yeah, I think, it's a couple of different things. Well, it's what actually started my whole idea for my TED Talk. Was I was coaching several different individuals one on one, and they were talking about a situation or a time that they wish they had spoken up or they wanted to say something, and I was like, well, why didn't you? Well, I
Mm.
just didn't feel like it was the right time. I don't know. I was afraid it wasn't going to be the right spot, whatever. And so I submitted that to the TED folks. I didn't think it was that of a novel concept of like how to actually speak up and have honest conversations
Mhm.
at work. And, they picked it because they're like, these are just basic things that people are dealing with every day. And I think it's one, the four tips of, and I'll just go through them really quickly, is the first one is confidence. So let's have the confidence to speak up because you've got something to say and you want to make sure that that it's being heard. The second one is intent, and it goes down to what is your intent of speaking up. So when you have to bring that confidence and that courage, there's usually an intent behind it, and you want to make sure that it's a positive intent. The third one is delivery. So delivery and how we say our messaging and how we communicate every day is critical. And I don't know about you, but there's probably been times when I said something that just didn't land very well. So starting to practice that
Oh.
delivery and working with it it's a critical skill that I think, if you're open to feedback and how you deliver messages can really take you far in your career as well as in your personal life.
Mm.
And then
I
the last
I
one, oh,
agree.
sorry, is always to seek a solution. So heading into any
Mhm.
type of conversation or conflict with like, here's a solution that we could potentially try. Because if you just come in with like all this negative or potential feedback, let's also turn the conversation with a solution. Because you'll see that people are like, oh, we didn't
Mm.
think about that. Or yes, or yes, but maybe not work here. Let's try something else, right? So it actually changes your conversation. So yeah, that was really the emphasis behind the TED Talk, and I think it's starting to practice those and keeping those almost just front and center as you're communicating and as you're navigating your life, personally and professionally.
There's a lot there. Even each one of those
It's a whole other
points
podcast,
takes a lot of.
right?
Yeah, no, no, and I think people need to listen to the TED Talk. I think it's such an
Thank
interesting
you.
topic, and kickstarting honest conversations at work. I completely endorse that. I think that when people aren't honest or they don't feel that they've got that kind of necessarily that outlet in order to talk, that's when problems start to arise. And I think you made some interesting points there. And kind of one of the learning points I just took from what you said was, and I believe this. I think life is about perspective,
Hmm.
and if you have the ability to look through the looking glass at how other people are viewing things, that's going to allow you to kind of advance in life. But I always find it quite puzzling just how many business people or leaders that I come across who it's not that they don't look at things through other people's perspective, but it's not a natural default way of thinking. And it's
Right.
always they look from their perspective and then go, well, why is this person doing this? Well, hang on a minute, have you stopped to think about how this person is feeling
Yes.
and look at them? But A lot of the time that might come down to time, or the person not necessarily. You've got to look at each person as an
You
individual in
do.
the company.
You
Even if
do.
you're a big company, everyone's important. If they weren't important, they wouldn't have a job.
Exactly. And I think it also comes down to listening. So I don't know about you, but how often is somebody talking to you and you're formulating an answer in your brain already and you're not really listening to what they have to say because you're getting ready to respond
Mm.
back. So I think that's a key thing. I know we talked about it earlier, but it is about, I mean, if it's almost a practice. It's like, how do I intentionally listen to somebody so I
And be
can understand their
present.
yeah,
Being
being present
present.
and understand their
You
perspective.
know.
Huge. Absolutely.
Mm. I call that queuing, and when you're building up that in your mind, what you want to say to the person, and you're getting ready, you're ready to come back with your thing and your point or whatever it is you want to say, and being present is actually quite a hard skill in itself, because I know myself, my mind it feels like a supercomputer at
Right.
times. There's so
Right.
much going round,
Yeah.
and sometimes I have to think to myself, no, I'm not listening, I'm not being present, and actually having that skill to listen is so important. But a lot of the time, if you're not listening properly, you're going to miss something, and then you might miss an opportunity. I wanted to talk to you as well. One of the things I know that you're very passionate about is understanding and honoring your personal values.
Yes.
Again, so they don't just help you both professionally, but also personally. Tell us a bit about kind of what does honoring your personal values really mean.
Yeah, I went through this exercise when I was going through part of my coach training, and it's tapping into really your core values. What guides you? What is kind of your North Star? And it's one of the workshops that I run, and it's taking understanding different points in your life when you felt happy, when you felt fulfilled, when you felt really disappointed, and starting to draw out where there's some common themes. And you'd be really surprised that there are common themes in different scenarios and situations. And getting very grounded in what are your top core values. When you can land on those, they will actually help you navigate personally and professionally. So they can help you to make decisions to say, okay, when you're having to make a decision, and again it goes back to that gut and you're feeling something, you're usually compromising one of your core values. Or if something's happening and you're
Mm.
excited and you're feeling really fulfilled and you're ready to go, you're actually honoring one of your values. So if you can get to understanding what are your core values, and I try to limit to 3 to 5. What are my top 3 to 5 core values? And in the decisions that I make and as I navigate my life personally and professionally, am I honoring them or am I not?
Can I ask what your personal values are? Because people
Gosh, I
might
knew
find
you were
this
going to do
useful to know.
that. Okay. Well, I can tell you, I'll give you, my top three are freedom. So having the
Uh-huh.
freedom to be able to make decisions that, on my own, my family, and balance. I'm really,
Mm.
I need balance in my life. I'm a working mother. I've got kids. I'm living in the pandemic. So those three
Need
are
you
really,
say more?
yeah. And then I actually would have one, it's funny. I knew you were going to say this. Fun. Having fun
Mm.
and being able to laugh and enjoy life and enjoy your work and developing good, meaningful relationships is another one as well.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to ask you your personal values is you've got a lot of life experience, and to hear what your values are, I think that could be really useful to people listening to this. What advice would you give to? We're coming to the end of our time together, and I could talk to you, Betsy, for many an hour about all different things, and I've tried to cram and as much as I possibly can into this time with you.
I get it.
But what advice would you give to someone? And I appreciate this is somewhat generic, but some of us may be thinking, I'm not where I want to be right now. I'm not in the job I want to be. I'm not feeling that, having listened to personal values, I'm not feeling that I'm living, the life I want to live. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I would, I think one is slow down, right? Take a deep breath, really get grounded and centered with who you are and what is important to you, and go through a series of
Mm.
exercises of when was I the most happiest? When was I the most fulfilled? When have I ever been upset or angry? And it'll start to maybe lead you into what are my core values from that perspective? And then that should allow you to kind of think about, the work that I'm doing, which one of my values are maybe being compromised, which ones am I honoring, and what do I need to do next in order to start to honor those? Because when we're honoring our core values, we actually feel centered and balanced, and we're living a life of like purpose and meaningfulness. And I think that is what's most critical. But it really is like taking a deep breath and like getting centered first. Because I don't know about you, but life has been super hectic, the past year plus. And even though we're all home, I just feel like there's such a intensity and we aren't able to really just kind of slow down and think and spend time just really getting into our thoughts, into our what drives us and motivates us.
And I think that's a really beautiful note to kind of leave the show on. But Betsy, if people want to find out more about you or indeed cross impact coaching, or perhaps they want to listen to the TED Talk,
Yeah.
and you're also an author of a book. So if people want to find out more about you, where can they go to?
Yep, crossimpactcoaching.com is going to be the best place. You can find a link to my TED Talk. You can link in with me on LinkedIn. All of my articles and everything that I've done over the past, what feels like forever, are all out there. So just go out to the website. If you're interested in a workshop or running a workshop at your organization, send me a note and we'll go from there.
Great. The Knowledge Hub, crossimpactcoaching.com. Betsy, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute delight to talk to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it.
That was Betsy Kauffman from North Carolina in the US. I'm Jason Connolly. This is the Career Success Podcast. Until next time, goodbye.